It's time to get heavy! Or at least we're going to try to. The Universal Migrator Part 2, The Flight of the Migrator by Ayreon. So, this is the 5th studio release from Ayreon. With the anticipation of his latest release coming up soon, I decided to look back at all of his albums leading up to this new one that he's going to be releasing. And so we come to the 5th studio album. With the Universal Migrator, it's a beautiful concept and one that I love when bands do. It's a splitting of minds, so to speak, where most of the time the band is very heavy or they blend very soft things. Bands such as Opeth and the Devin Townsend Project have captured this very, very well with their own kind of duality albums, shall we say. And when Ayreon decided to do this, it was definitely that softer, harder feel, and this is definitely true within the Universal Migrator Part 2. The Flight of the Migrator is so much more heavy in comparison to the Dream Sequencer. The Flight of the Migrator has a lot more of the heavy riffs, there's a lot less emphasis on atmosphere. This is a lot more rooted in just noodling away on the guitars, dipping its toe into chaos, and we see that especially within the talent that Ayreon has brought on this. Within the Universal Migrator Part 1, we saw the guest star performer being Neil Morse, and on here we see it as Bruce Dickinson within the 5th track of Into the Black Hole. And the other one that I really enjoy is the guest star performance of Michael Romeo from Symphony X. So with these two personalities along with a long sheet of guest performers on this, and unlike the Universal Migrator Part 1, Part 2 I didn't quite connect with as much. I felt like there was too much throwing things at the wall to seeing what sticks instead of really hunkering down and creating the song, and I think that just came with the territory of this particular type of music. I mean, that's the inherent clause on this. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. The one saving grace that I do have for this album is that I love that it allowed Arjen Lucanson to really experiment and find out what works and what doesn't, because he applied a lot of those ideologies and a lot of those techniques on his next album, which I really can't wait to dive into, but I'm going to hunker down and kind of study this one. And right out of the gate, we already see a difference between the first and the second album within this Universal Migrator. The track lengths generally are a lot longer. We're stretching now into the 7, 8, and 10 minute mark on a lot of these guys. And they're also broken down into sections. No longer is it just like one song, one song, one song. Now we have, especially with song 4, To the Quasar, we've got part A and B, and Into the Black Hole, we have part A, B, and C. And this one, at least story-wise, is definitely much more of a turbulent journey for our lead protagonist in this. You know, he is no longer floating through space, experiencing what other people are experiencing. This one, he is floating through space and experiencing the chaos of space. And so definitely one of the highlights about this album is that storyline. Now, I know that I've already critiqued quite a bit about this album, but the music that is found on this is still quite magnificent, and it really gets me going when I'm hearing a lot of these just strings of music. There's no real point at which I gush, but there is a lot of points where I stop and go, wow, that was quite something, that was quite amazing. The first song of Chaos. The song itself is a little bit chaotic, and it really sets the foundation for what we're going to be expecting within this particular album. And within the second track of Dawn of a Million Souls, that really deep and guttural movements within there, it really provides a fantastic kind of contrast to what we had already been hearing within part 1. And so where Chaos was setting the foundation of what to expect within just the chaos of music, Dawn of a Million Souls says, yeah, this one is going to be a lot more heavy hitting. This one is going to take you for a crazy ride, so get ready because it's going to be intense. And Michael Romeo's playing on this is just fantastic. And one of the things that I do like about Michael's playing, especially within this track, is whenever Arjen brings on guest performers, it can kind of feel out of place, but it wasn't until I sat down and I actually looked at the sheet notes on this album that I realized, oh, that was Michael's playing. That's why it sounded so amazing. So I enjoyed that it was able to be a seamless transition between his solo and the rest of the music. The Journey on the Waves of Time. This one is definitely a callback to like that hair metal from like the 80s, where the lead singer there, I could just picture having the long flowing, golden blonde hair, just singing out into the waves. So let's talk about that fifth song of Into the Quasar. It's definitely a great treat, and I love how the song builds. Like, this is one of the longer songs, stretching into the 8-minute mark, so it takes its time to really build, and then we have that play out where it's just that heavy hitting, over the top, just bam. Interesting is the next song of Into the Black Hole is almost like a mirror of To the Quasar, where the first bit of this song is a real build towards the midpoint, and then once we get to the midpoint, it's just this dark and guttural and oomph kind of a feel to it. What I really enjoy about this song is that keyboard solo that we have near the midpoint. I feel like as though Ayreon as a band is almost double dipping, because we've already heard this style before within To the Quasar, and to have it followed up with Into the Black Hole was a little strange. I mean, it makes sense narratively within the story of the album, but musically and thematically, I'm wondering if it was really the right choice to mirror the songs so close together. And Bruce's vocals on here fit perfectly within the whole stylings, and you couldn't have asked for a better fit on this album than Bruce.
Spirits, apparitions, misery, suffering.
Now, one of the most fun songs on this album is Through the Wormhole. It's not necessarily the best song on the album, which isn't really saying much overall, but it's definitely one of the more fun songs. It's got that get up and go kind of drive towards it. The beat and rhythm section on this song is a highlight for me, because you've got that boom 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 boom. It's very like mechanical and machine-like, but on the same hand, it's always moving forward.
That leads us to the mystic soul.
And so once we come to the seventh song, this is where, at least for me, I start to kind of check out, because with albums such as this, and this is one of the main reasons why I don't gravitate to a lot of like really heavy hitting metal bands that stay up here the entire time, because there's no real lull in the album for like a solid song. We do have lulls for the build-ups for the songs. I start to find myself tuning out because it's almost too similar, and Out of the White Hole definitely has that. Now, we do have the To the Solar System, the second last song, where it does again take its time to really build, and it allows a little bit of a breather, but by this point I've already kind of checked out. It really leads itself to a really nice crescendo, but where it builds to is a place that we've already been, so I feel like again we're kind of double dipping within the musical stylings. Now, the final track of the new Migrator, we find the story close. I've listened to this album now for a number of years, and I still have a really hard time getting to this point without my mind wandering, which is a shame, because the playing on this song is just fantastic, and I love the closeout of this, where it's just the organs and we've just got the synthesizers bringing everything to a close. So overall, this album as a whole is a little bit of a letdown in comparison to the two albums that came before it. In the grand scheme of Ayreon's library, this one is definitely on the weaker side of things, but that doesn't really discredit the music that's found within it, because there are still some fantastic movements on this. But because there's too much of the same without too much variation between it, it does become a little bit of a task to get through, and this is part of the risk that is run when you're dealing with an album such as this. But I'm not going to fault it too much for that. I'm still going to give it a relatively positive review with, you've got to at least stream this album just to see if it's up your alley. I love when bands do this. I love when they do a softer album followed up with a harder album, or vice versa. So that's about it about the Universal Migrators Part 1 and Part 2, which means coming into March, I'm going to be reviewing possibly my favorite album from him, The Human Equation. So I can't wait to talk about that one with you guys, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.